is 7:12. You guys got your. This meeting is being broadcast on local cable TV and recorded for rebroadcast on the local cable channels and on the internet. I'd like to thank everybody involved with the Memorial Day events, especially Angus Jennings and Teresa Ford. They really, I think we had our best parade in my memory.
Yeah,
excellent parade. We had great weather. We had a nice ceremony. Everything was good.
Thanks for the police chief, thank you for being there, thanks for.
Absolutely. Wayne, you put in a lot of work too.
Yeah.
Thank you.
The chairs are perfect the way you set it up.
And if I could, Archie, I'd also want to specifically name Brian Richard. He did a tremendous amount of work in the weeks leading up to the parade to beautify the entire area, which people have come to expect, but I think it still shouldn't go without comment. He definitely worked hard.
Okay. Yeah, just the, anyone that is on a committee that, wants to be, whose term is expiring, we'd like to, I know this has been brought to everyone's attention, but to reiterate, we'd like people to, contact, Angus, and with their, intend to re-up or not re-up, that we'd like to know that ASAP. And there is on June 2nd, there is a food drive that will be at the Food Mart for the benefit of the Council on Aging. Will be sponsoring that. Items needed are toiletries, such as deodorant, soap, paper products, paper towels, toilet paper, food staples like soup, canned food, cereal, those kind of things, and they can be left off on Sunday, June 2nd, from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. at the Food Mart. On June 7th, there will be a meeting of the Merrimack River Task Force. It will be at Northern Essex Community College at 10 a.m. to noon time. If I think it's might be worthwhile. Angus, do you know of anyone that could attend for West Newbury at that?
Yeah, I can make sure that either me or someone else on staff is present. It's a really timely issue. It's something Wayne and I go to the meetings, either he or I typically go to the meetings every month on which includes stormwater management, CSOs, river quality, so I can make sure that either he or I can attend.
I'm sure you're going to discuss dumping the sewage dumping into the river
Mm-hmm.
and stuff like that.
Yep.
That's one of the big.
Oh, that is the big topic. Yes.
I'll hope to be there also.
Good.
You gonna try both of them? Okay.
Yeah, I'll probably be there as well.
Yeah, and the invitation was sent to Planning Board, Conservation Commission, and to the River Access, or not River Access, to the Harbor Committee as well.
Okay. All right. First item on our agenda is a street opening permit for 9 Robin Road.
Okay, this straightforward application, other than the fact that it came in with a different address than the actual address, so you have the correspondence in there explaining that. So it names 13 Robin Road, but it's actually 9 Robin Road. But other than that, everything is in order. If there's questions, Wayne's here tonight. Both Water and DPW have signed off on it.
I'll second it.
further discussion? All in favor of speed limit permit? Aye. Aye.
Okay, and just as per prior board actions, that would be, subject to meeting the stipulations set out in the DPW and Water Department notes.
Okay, next item, we have a request for one-day liquor licenses for two bicentennial events on the 12th for a dance at the town hall, and the second one on July 13th for the field day. American Barbecue will be the first event, and Mercury Brewing on the second event.
Okay. We have, as you see in the packet, we have all the documentation that's required. My only recommendation is on the July 12th event that that a condition of approval be that an updated tip certification be provided to the town at least 1 week prior to the date of the event, which the vendor is aware of that and happy with that. They just their tips thing needs to be renewed before the event.
We charging them for the permits?
No, we are not. We actually don't have a fee schedule for liquor licenses.
I'll just waive that. Make sure that's
Yeah, I was curious, a little sort of a minor thing on the applications. I noticed one of them was checked off nonprofit and the other one says for-profit. Maybe that was just their interpretation of what their business was. I don't know who actually filled out the, looks like the forms were filled out by American Barbecue and by somebody from Mercury Brewing. So,
That's right.
but I just noticed that as I scanned over them.
Yeah, and actually, as I
The other one says nonprofit.
yeah, and I think on the second one, the one that says for-profit, my guess is that the brewery is stating that they, as a business, are for-profit, but the activity itself is a non-profit activity. So I think that's how I read that.
I just wondered about the, if you go to just a little, our little form filled out by the, Mercury Brewing, 9 AM to 11 PM, that's a long time to have a,
I think it's, but it says up below that setup and breakdown, so I think that includes
the event doesn't even start, so.
I know, but so why would that start at that? I just set up a okay.
they probably want themselves time where they can, in case.
Right, but you have to have a liquor license to have the, to getting, to be setting up, but I don't think I would just be over careful.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, so you have some pretty serious, drinking going on, you're starting at 9 and ending at 11 PM.
I do have separately, this is not a request to the board, but my office has the request for the use of facilities for that day, for the July 13th event. I have not yet signed off on it. I fully intend to, but I've been working with the police and fire chiefs and DPW and the Bicentennial Committee to work out some of the questions, because we want to make sure we've got it thoroughly thought through before I sign off on that. So that might be, if there's a question from the board as to what the, yeah.
For the actual.
Jeff, do you know what the range of the, do you want to take the mic? You got to press the button so it's the light screen.
Push it under here.
All right, my understanding is, I don't have the paperwork in front of me, that the beer tent closes at 6 p.m.
Starting.
I think it's noon to 6. It's not that whole time period.
So they're not consuming any beer during the fireworks?
No. It's supposed to stop at 6 o'clock. Okay.
That makes sense.
That makes a lot.
Yeah, actually, it does say here on their application, starting and ending time of beer service 12 PM to 6 PM, just like Jeff said.
Okay. Any other further discussion? You good?
Yeah, I'm good, yeah.
Okay. So we'll make a motion?
I think I can.
Oh, okay.
And I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Just so I'm clear, is that for both?
Yes.
Okay. And that's,
We
yeah.
have a request for a line item transfer, registrars, line item responsibility voting.
Okay, and this is, was approved last week by the Finance Committee, and this is a fairly routine overage. It's a requested transfer of $300 within the Board of Registrar's budget from their expense to their wages line to take into account the extra costs of the early voting.
Further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Aye. Next item, request for appointment of police officer Jay Johnson as interim sergeant in the police department. So you can just give us like,
Yep.
1 or 2 sentences. We know what's going on, but just so people at home.
Nope,
No.
the department structure had been set up with a chief and 2 sergeants positions. So now we're down to 1 sergeant, and I'd like to fill the sergeant's position with an acting position with Officer Johnson. He's the most senior officer on the department, and according to the rules and regulations that we adopted in order to have the department accredited, if we're gonna post a promotional exam, which will be done, it has to be at least 4 months before the actual test. So that's just way too much time to let go by before we get someone in that position. There's a lot of work that needs to be done, and I'm recommending Jay for the position.
That position will be at night.
He'll be on second shift, 3 to 11s. Sergeant Cena, who currently works those shifts, will be dropping down to day shifts.
Jeff, when would you anticipate the formal process of having applications and that kind of thing?
I think I'd like to post for the permanent position probably in February. Have that 4-month period go by, have the testing around this time next year. Try to have the appointment made in June, taking effect after July 1st, so we can get it into the budget for next year. It won't affect this year's budget.
So to start the next, start of the next fiscal year?
Correct.
Okay.
So the interim would be then for a full year.
Yep, almost a little over a year.
So, I'm taking him off as a patrolman, now we're gonna leave a short patrolman, how would you feel that?
Well, we still have reserves. They interviewed today for new reserve positions. There's still that open 10th full-time position that needs to be discussed at a future meeting. I don't think there's gonna be an issue having shifts filled.
So, obviously, we can make this, but it has to be subject to the approval of the union.
Correct.
So
Yep.
that still needs to be.
We've never had an acting sergeant's position before, so this is kind of uncharted territory for the department as well.
Right, so we felt that if we can have a letter of agreement between the the Angus drafts and between, and the union agrees to, basically, just so that we're not concerned about the taking on, but if we had to get in a situation where he doesn't become a permanent one, then the union might not be agreeable to drop it back until
Right,
you have that written down.
Yep, I understand the concern, but I have discussed it with Officer Johnson. He knows it's not a permanent appointment, and you would have to participate in the test for the permanent
No, we
position.
understand
We're gonna do that with the union.
Yep, I understand.
We just wanna have that written down.
Yep.
That's all.
And so that means we can make that, but we subject to that tonight, and so it still could start until they.
Okay, that's fine.
You will get yelled at for that.
Yep.
Have 4 or 5 times that. So, good. Okay, so I make a motion that we make Jeff,
And that agreement will be signed then by Angus, correct?
So, so the, basically, the agreement with the union will be the new, an interim sergeant job description that will specify that it's a limited term appointment, and we would look for agreement that in the event that the person doesn't, ends up reverting to their current position, that will not be construed as a negative personnel or an adverse personnel action under the terms of the contract. So what was discussed is that we would have that agreement, and that I would be the signatory. But
So the signatory would be you and the union rep.
so I make a motion, Jay Johnson, an interim sergeant. Vision that we would come to terms, with a side letter with the union, make sure that,
That's fine.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The, you wanna stick with that? Go ahead.
No, I thought he was leaving, I wouldn't mind Jeff sticking around for the next one.
Next item is a, discussion on stop signs and first turn road and certain, an area where we've had some, consequential accidents, and, we'll try to see what we can do to minimize those situations happening again.
we did have another accident a few weeks ago, and following that, I met with Wayne and with Chief Durand and Chief Dwyer, asked Wayne to take another look at it, so I'd invite him to present his recommendations. And I will say both of the chiefs have reviewed and concur with the recommendation, but I think it'd be good, since he did the study, for him to speak to that.
So if you saw my memo, we did some training movements out there. I did not do the 8 hours as MUTCD suggests, because you saw the volume was so low during the peak hours that I did the morning, midday, and afternoon peak training movements out there. And to my surprise, the stop signs are on the incorrect approach. They're supposed to be on the minor approach and not the major, and right now they're on the major approach. Now, if you look how low the volumes are,
So was that a surprise that Crane Neck is actually the more?
I was surprised.
Yeah.
I was surprised, and I think
I would be surprised.
I think everybody was, because that's why it was there in the first place. So, and it was the same on all 3 studies. So it wasn't like it was a fluke during the morning and it changed during the afternoon. It was the same on all 3 studies that it showed. MUTCD would say you would switch the signs around, take them down, and put them on the other side. As you see in my memo, I don't, on the other streets. In my memo, oppose that idea because the existing stop sign's been out there so long. I think you caused a lot of confusion out there, people not knowing why the signs have been moved. So it does allow you to just post an always stop based on some of the warrants. The volume is low. Yep.
What did you say about it before? You said
It would warrant an always stop under 2 of the warrants in the MUTCD. One thing nice about the manual, it does allow for engineers to make a judgment call on stop signs as long as we can make the case why. And this is one of the cases where you got 2, you would say at the end of the day, 2 minor approaches or 4 minor approaches coming to an intersection. So it could be somewhat confusing because you don't know exactly what the major approaches, which is why the stop signs are put where they are. We all thought it was the other way around. So it is confusing. You don't know what the major, we might have thought we knew what it was, but we don't until we did the counts. So I was just recommending to make it an always stop. I think it'd be less confusing that way based on the volumes.
I mean, if I recall, so this one and maybe a few of the other ones were a question of I want to get all the facts out there. The cars going on Crane Neck actually ran the stop sign, so having a stop sign you can't do anything. It doesn't do any good if people just run the stop signs anyway. So
Well, it's funny that you say that because I was going back from Middle Street, going to Groveland, right? So that way, coming back down Georgetown Road.
okay.
Mary and I are in the car coming this way towards the center of town, and somebody came up from 110 where the thing didn't even stop, right? And went down Georgetown Road, and she goes, "People are going to get killed. That's on our agenda tonight." She goes, "Well, it's not going to help if nobody stops at the stop sign." I said, "But if you put 4 down, it'll make it a lot easier."
Yeah, well, part of, I think, having 4 signs, one of the things that's gonna do is it's gonna give people a longer time to see other vehicles, and, more likelihood that they'll actually, observe a vehicle and it'll get their attention. Yeah, sorry, okay, yep, I understand. Yeah, so my point was that having 4 stop signs will give people more time to see other vehicles, because if somebody's fiddling with their phone, and of course nobody does that, but if somebody's fiddling with their phone and they're cruising down, Crane Neck Street at 40 miles an hour, which isn't unusual, then either they may not even see the sign, but at least somebody else who's stopped at a stop sign will see them approaching and know enough not to pull in front of them.
I mean, just keep in mind that so
Yeah. So I've seen.
disclaimer.
I've seen every variation of bad behavior at that intersection, and there are multiple forms of bad behavior at that intersection.
So just keep in mind, anywhere you have low volume, which this intersection has, your full stop compliance is low. Yeah. That's where you get the roll stop. Right. Where as an engineer, we go out and we study full stops, 1 to 3 mile an hour stops, 5 to 7 mile an hour stops. I did not do that out there, but you will see rolling stops out there. But still, if a rolling stop and a rolling stop hit each other, you get 2 5 mile an hour crash, 5 mile an hour strikes out there. Then absolutely. So it's you're not going to get full. People will not be stopping. You won't get 100% compliance.
Yeah, the other thing that is going to stop is a lot of people. I'm surprised. I've never heard of an accident because of this, but I'd say at least 25% of the traffic coming from Georgetown Road headed south to go east on Crane Neck cuts the corner significantly. They swing and so I've had to punch my brakes more than once so that somebody didn't run into me as they cut through my lane.
Yes.
Okay, I go for it. Do we need to vote on this? I think the motion to go along with the recommendation. When will that?
I'll second, sorry.
Discussion, when will it happen?
So I do just want to, I don't want to speak for Wayne, but he did bring up the point that while he recommends the 4-way stop, and I think that's the way to go, people should be aware that with the installation of a new stop sign where people aren't used to it, you can expect for some period of time while people adjust that you may see more rear-end collisions of people trailing someone, not expecting the person in front of them to stop because they're not expecting the stop sign. So just if that happens, we need to be aware that might happen. But people will adjust and it'll be fine. So.
Yes, we'll do it when we do so I wouldn't put up the stop signs until we did the painting of the stop bars first, which is scheduled to come after we do the crack seal the next week or two. So after we finish crack seal, we'll schedule the pavement marking company to come in. Sometimes they're here in a week, sometimes they're here in 3.5 months, but I will push them to be in July because we have the whole town to do. So once we get the stop bars put down there, we will put the stop signs up after the stop bars are in. We might do something funky. I might be able to borrow some. We made up some old orange and black stop sign ahead construction signs that are tacky and ugly, but it brings the attention up. Maybe you put them on the side of the road on the month. They do have does have signs that say traffic pattern changed ahead, but it's so you have to stop and read the sign and figure out what that means. So I think maybe a construction stop ahead sign, something might be more tackier, and maybe people pay attention to that better. So
why, while both, if you don't mind, while both Jeff and Wayne are here, a question about another intersection, and I know it's not on the agenda, but just something to think about maybe or look at, is where Tewksbury comes into Georgetown Road. As far as I know, that's an uncontrolled intersection.
Tewksbury as it comes into.
Tewksbury Road where it comes into Georgetown Road. Yeah, but more importantly is if somebody's on Tewksbury coming towards Georgetown Road, I don't believe there's any control on that intersection at all. I don't think there's not a yield sign, I don't think there's a stop sign.
That's correct. There isn't.
Nothing. And
Tewksbury is a very, very low traffic.
But on the other hand, I've seen people blow right through that on Georgetown Road, and it comes down to, just because it's low traffic, the probability says sometime, the cost of a sign maybe prevent somebody from creaming somebody else.
So MUTCD says you don't have to have a stop sign there. The person on the side street, on the minor street, is supposed to yield to the driver on the major street. And it says the first control is a yield sign, which I think in New England and Northeast is confusing because people come to a T intersection or an angled intersection, they see a yield sign, and then they definitely won't stop. So if we were going to go from no control to a control, I would go to a stop sign on Tewksbury. It's not a traffic reg change because they're supposed to stop anyhow when they approach or yield. It's up to the town to decide if they're going to yield or stop.
When you're down there looking at that, there's a little stream that goes through there. We get thanks for years that we need to start with.
Yes, that's on our list. It has the 2 concrete poles that are broken up and everything. Yep. Yep. So we could go ahead, I'm sorry, but we could go ahead and put up the stop sign on Tewksbury also. It's really not a traffic change. It doesn't do anything for the police department, do any enforcement. It's just a T intersection where they should be stopping legally anyhow if we want them to stop. So that's just, so that could be done. Unless you.
Wait, do we have to publish this as a traffic control newspaper?
Only if it's in your bylaws, you do. I don't know if it's in.
Because the statute says that any traffic laws we put in.
I think when Mass Highway changed the rules in '86, it allowed all traffic controls to be regulated other than speeds and bridge weight limits and truck restrictions to be regulated by the town, the city of town. So whatever standard or policy we have to do that.
Okay, so it's not like the parking restrictions that we have to publish.
Unless you have a bylaw that says all traffic, but.
Okay, good. Jeff, are you good with this idea? The 4-way?
No, the last couple of accidents down there have been pretty serious. The latest one involved a new driver. I don't know what was going on in the car. He was ticketed. The line of sight coming the direction he is very clear. There's 3 signs, stop ahead, and the stop sign. So I don't know if he was on the phone or looking out the window, but I think a 4-way stop will be very helpful down there.
And I did hear from Chief Dwyer as well, and he supports the recommended change.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thanks, Wayne, thanks, Jeff.
Yeah, good work on that. Thank you.
Next item is a Conservation Commission correspondence regarding FY 20 wages line item.
So, as you know, the conservation agent is retiring. The commission has advertised the position and has put a memo before you looking to, for confirmation that the salary and wages would be funded at the level, or up to the level in the approved budget. And we have members of the commission here, so they may wish to elaborate. I'm not.
Hi, good,
Is there anything you want to elaborate?
yeah.
Speaks for itself, I mean.
I think the letter's
Yeah,
clear.
it does. Yeah.
Right.
Okay, so maybe I have a question. So it is funded this time. The board of selectmen will fund the rage weight. That's what we do in June, correct?
Wage rate, not rage rate.
Wage rate. You should tell us, kid. You can tell I do it. Wage rate in June. So we're not funding the salary. We're going to do the wage rate. So I think we're
The
premature.
line item has already been funded by town meeting.
Yeah, exactly. We're very premature taking any votes, saying anything, when we don't even know the individual yet. Maybe they may be at different levels or whatever. I mean, to fund it at town meeting, we would have to then see the individual and then vote the recommended wage rate that you guys are giving to us. And under those parameters, and, you know, this is the reason why we want this individual at this level. This is the wage rate that we're going to recommend at that level for the experience this person has, or lack of experience, whatever. I mean, that's what we recommend. I don't see a problem with it. I think we're just premature. Sorry, bro. That's my opinion. I'm not going to go on anything tonight. I mean, it's been approved already by the town, and the only function that we have is that we vote away for it. I was not. I don't have anything in front of me that I can vote anything. Other than this is what we voted on.
Right, the money has been appropriated.
So that would be.
So you're looking for confirmation, though, that if you have a suitable candidate and you want to offer the full salary, that would be supported by the Board of Selectmen.
Right, this was in response to some behind-the-scenes talk about this position, that there was a possibility that the board may not approve a wage rate that would come out to the salary for 20 hours. And so we don't want to enter into negotiations with a candidate and then get blindsided by, you know, a much lower rate than what we're anticipating. I mean, we're assuming it would be the same rate that Jay is currently paid. So we're looking for confirmation.
I'm not going to confirm anything that hypothetical. I can't do that. So anything that was said behind the scenes, I can't speak to that. And the only thing I said was, I hope they can find a qualified person, because we have a lot of good experience with Jay. So I hope we can find somebody in 20 hours a week at that rate. You know what I mean? That I would feel it's low. So that's the conversation I think I was saying at the Board of Health meeting. That's all hypothetical. If you bring somebody to us and that you feel is qualified, that meets Jay's rate, there's no reason why I wouldn't do it.
You think this is going to be a viable rate as is this going to be adequate for you to find someone?
Well, that's what's been approved by town meeting. I mean, I think we
Right,
have to, so we're looking for confirmation that that is the, you know, the minimum that we would be able to pay.
We keep you the same level of services.
20 hours at that rate. I mean, so essentially that is the rate, right? If it's a 20-hour-a-week position and we have the total salary, then
But I think it has to do with level. What was Jay's level? You
6.
can't bring somebody in that's not experienced enough to expect them to take rate either. I would think, would we?
No, I mean, we wouldn't hire anybody that wasn't,
It would be the level, I want to know what level Jay was.
he's grade 6, or level 6.
It would have to be at least level six.
Yeah. I mean, I believe the position is at a lower grade level than it should be and is underfunded, but we just want to make sure that's the absolute minimum that we're going to be able to work with. And since town meeting's already approved it, it seems like it.
When you say
The
minimum.
minimum, yeah, I don't get it. You mean the max, that's the maximum.
I just want to make sure that what town meeting approved is what we can negotiate with, and that's the concern. So 20 hours a week at whatever that line item salary is the rate, the wage rate that we're talking about.
That's how it is with everybody. I mean, so you think it's your need to send a letter in being unique with everybody else, because Jay's retiring, and you've heard back talk that the selectmen might not approve this because we had a recommendation that we try to save the town money, try to combine conservation with the Board of Health position. And so are you afraid that we're not going to that? Because I was just trying to get the back talk out so everybody understands so we don't seem like we're talking perfect. So are you afraid that there is the talk to try to move you back?
We're not going to.
We're not going to do that, and then you have to do it. Is that what it's all about?
That's what's been said, yeah.
That's been said. That's been said that we're not going to fund this, and then you have to call. I don't.
No, it's been said that the Board of Selectmen can authorize a lower wage rate than the current, or the one that was approved by town meeting.
Well, that is everybody. We can do that with anybody.
Okay, so it makes it difficult to negotiate with a potential candidate if we're not sure that we're even going to be able to offer what Jay is currently making. Assuming that.
Well, I think you heard from us tonight, if you brought a credible person here that had good experience and you made a case for that person for that wage rate, I don't think you disagree, but that goes with everybody. We're the ones who do. It might be a system that you don't like, but that's the system that we have to play with. And that goes with every single person in town. I don't know. I can't, other than what I just said, that you're afraid that we're going to be nefarious and vote 0 on that, and then you can't hire somebody, and then you're ended up have to use Paul. I think that maybe what you can get to.
No, it has nothing to do with Paul. It has nothing to do.
I can't see that. I can't see that happening. No.
So I don't.
Okay, so is there an issue with taking a vote on it? I mean, there was enough concern at the commission meeting that the process of interviewing could be compromised by, this intention of potentially not approving what was approved at town meeting, or not fulfilling what was approved at town meeting.
Well, I would say I would have a problem going, when you say minimum, I would have to know a lot more if you say this is the minimum that you're talking about going higher than that, then I have a little problem with it. You did say minimum.
We did. That's what we
A couple of times.
We got both confused.
Okay, I'm not sure how else to word it. But if that amount was approved, then it couldn't be less than that, right? I mean, what?
Well, you might find somebody that takes a job for less money. Yeah.
That I think that's pretty impossible.
Okay,
yeah.
but
So
I
what
just
if,
said, but I just didn't understand your use of the word minimum. You use it 3 times.
So I'm not saying there's a range and that's the minimum. What I'm saying is that's all we know, that rate is what's currently being paid, and we would like to know that we can at least offer that to a potential candidate.
Yes, you can.
Yes.
Approved it, not me.
Okay.
Yeah, but when you say at least, that's what I'm not getting.
Okay, I'm not, my
Let's get
apologies.
off that.
I'm not inferring that we would offer them
Yeah,
more.
okay. Absolutely, we don't have the intention of zeroing this out, as Glenn said.
Okay.
so if somebody came in at substantially less experience that you thought was still bringing something to the position, but they were say where they were a grade 4 or grade 5, would you still offer the same amount, or how would that likely?
We wouldn't offer it to anybody that wasn't
Okay.
at least as qualified as
Okay.
Jay. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, he's probably 40%, making 40% less than the going rate right now.
Yeah,
So,
okay.
I mean, I can't ever see, both candidates
Right.
we're looking at have more experience
Yeah,
than he does.
okay. Well, is there any harm in us just saying that we'll support the amount that was funded by town meeting?
Well, it's hard in the sense that I don't wanna vote on any hypotheticals. You're asking me to vote on a wage rate, because that's all we do, about something that is not in front of us. But I fully support, I didn't put a hold on the $29,000 at town meeting, I fully support that amount. I'm very concerned that it's not enough. That my concern was that we might have to get somebody qualified, but we might have to restrict the hours back just to get somebody. I wouldn't be in favor of that, because then the level of services would go down.
Right.
Then it's a whole different ballgame, and then we have to reassess it. But I'm afraid that we're not gonna get the same level of services that we're presently getting for that amount of money, because now we're rebidding it into a work, force that we're getting, like I said at that meeting, we're getting a lot of stuff from Jay that he wasn't being properly compensated for. You know what I mean? Just the other experience.
Yeah.
And I'm afraid that we're not gonna get that same level for that amount of money, for 20 hours a week. We might get it for 10 hours a week, but then we don't have the same level of services. You know what I mean? The experience.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
stuff.
So we can be confident that the salary that was approved at town meeting, the line item, is what we have to work with to replace him.
I don't know how much we can, we
Yeah,
can say that.
absolutely.
Okay.
But I'm not gonna say
But
yes
I,
to
but I,
somebody
but
that's not
I
funded.
kind of agree with Glenn, is that I don't wanna vote on something that we don't know. This might set a precedent where every single person is coming to the board
Before the wage rate.
June, when we vote on the whole list of everybody, and it would really gum up the works, to be honest.
So why wouldn't everybody else do it?
I think the circumstances are a little bit different here, you know.
I don't think you should be nervous about us trying to
Force your hand.
force your hand in the sense of because this would have never come up if you guys probably, if we didn't say, hey, we have a great opportunity, and personally, I've said this all along, it's a missed opportunity if we don't at least talk to all the players involved to try to mold some in, save some money for the town, and maybe even get some higher level of services on both ends. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, but at least we had a discussion. That's my point.
Okay,
Okay?
all right. So you would say no action on the request to take a vote?
I would thank you, and I'm glad we had a discussion, because that helps us further on down the line. But I would say no action on this. But we don't have to even say no action, we don't have to vote. We can take this under advisement.
Yeah, I guess as I think about it, Wendy, I'm not sure, I mean, there's already a number budgeted. And, you know, I think you've heard from everybody here that there's no intention to not fund what was budgeted.
Okay,
And, you know, I think each of us have said that individually.
okay, well, that's great, that's what we're
So,
looking for.
But I guess I think I you know, I kind of get where Glenn's coming from, is we don't really have something, I mean, all we'd be voting on is saying, yeah, we vote that we're gonna do what town meeting approved. Of course we're gonna do that, that's, I mean, I think
Unless you bring us somebody with.
Unless someone,
Yeah,
if someone is really awful or something.
Or you're saying, you know, I thought Rick's question was actually a good one, when he said, maybe you could find somebody with a little bit less experience, but you can see the potential, so let's grab this person now, and then maybe grow a little bit with the job, but he's still, or she's still, you know, good and will be able to function well in town. I thought that was a good question, because but again, I already know it's underfunded. So you probably could get somebody like that with the money that you have.
Maybe.
You know what I mean? You know what I mean with that?
Yeah.
Because I still think it's underfunded, because we got a lot from Jay that putting it back out into the workforce, you're not gonna get. You're not gonna want more money.
So then, we voted to establish a screening subcommittee to interview. So, I mean, as with the library trustees, we came before you and said, this is what we want to offer. I mean, is that a separate discussion from the vote that you have in June where you approve the wage structures?
I would say yes. I don't know, Mr. Chairman, but you might want to ask Angus.
Yeah. Angus, you want to comment on that?
So there were some things in play with the library director that weren't in this instance. For one thing, there was an employment contract. So we wanted to ensure that the library board didn't enter into a contract that wasn't, we wanted to make sure it was a valid contract. So the specific instances were where the library board was looking for the board's approval and got it were wages, which is within the board's authority under the statute, as well as offering vacation above what's provided in the personnel policies. Obviously, as a 20-hour-a-week position, the vacation is as set forth in the personnel policies, so you wouldn't be looking for a departure on that. What was the other, Mike, do you recall what other issue, if any, with the library director? Yeah, I mean, there's no employment contract, there's no,
He is the employment contract.
Okay.
The employment contract.
Okay.
Yeah, so I really think it's the wages, and the board's made clear their expectation would be 20 hours. So I don't think of what else would require board action other than the wages. Mike, do you agree?
Okay.
I don't see anything else. But this board should do the
Mm-hmm.
So, so this all presumes that we have a candidate that we want to make an offer to before you vote on the wage rate? I mean, two things are happening at the same time. One is your annual review and approval of the wage rates, right? And then the other is the interviewing and offer to a candidate. So I'm just trying to figure out how those two things, come together.
Well, I can't, like we said before, I can't see that we would, except for some extraordinary circumstance, I can't see that we would not go with the wage that you were offering the person.
You're looking for an area this meeting, same level
Right.
of service, making sure it's the same level, education,
And they've got
all the
educational reason background to be at level 6, then I don't see that not happening.
So if we interview next week and we want to make an offer, what do we need to do as far as getting your approval? This is where I'm confused about how this is going to play out. I mean, when do you meet to approve the wage rate structure?
June 10th is what we're aiming for that, yeah.
So really, we can't make an offer until that meeting, until we.
Well, it could be an offer subject,
Subject to-
contingent on approval of the wages.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, I
That's a
think-
good question. I mean, I can understand why you'd be a little.
Yeah.
This is-
It's just two different things are happening around the same time, and so it's making
I
it.
guess you just didn't realize the wage, that we approve the wage thing every year really happens.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think people are making a little bit more of it than it really needs to be. More of us just, we don't change things that there. We just make sure
We just,
that.
oversight that, it's more oversight that it's done, that everyone is, that it's done correctly, because a couple of years ago, we re-voted the wage schedule like 8 times or something. Not because we were changing people's overall salary, but there were little problems. This person had 38 hours instead of 36 or whatever. There were just problems that we were just trying to dot the i's and cross the t's. It wasn't that we were micromanaging that this person needs to get $1 less or something like that. We weren't doing that. The voting is basically to make sure we're getting it right, I would say.
Yeah, me too.
So just out of curiosity, if you interviewed somebody and would you start anybody before the beginning of the next fiscal year?
I mean, ideally, we'd like to have them start and overlap with Jay for a week.
Okay, and how long is Jay around for?
Well, at the end of the month is his
Okay.
retirement date, so
So-
we have to figure that out.
Yeah, so how would that be funded and at what rate? Because this rate isn't actually relevant until the beginning of the next fiscal year. And
Yeah.
I mean, it's only a month away, or
Yeah.
just over a month away, but, you know, there could get kind of a week or two of, I don't know, how would we deal with that?
I don't know, we'd have to look at that, but I mean,
Yeah.
that would be an ideal situation,
Yeah.
but,
Other expense or the expense line item, haven't got any money in that?
I think there's some money left in the expense line.
Yeah, because, I mean, even this rate isn't,
Yeah.
this rate is reflective of FY '20, not of FY '19, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, until the beginning of FY '20,
Right.
we wouldn't, you know, I think the
I
rate
think
would have to
there's
be
just
the
a COLA
FY.
increase anyway,
Yeah.
right? Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, okay.
but I mean,
Alright.
just so that that's kind of, so we've thought about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The reserve fund transfer.
Right, yeah,
Go to finance committee, maybe you need a couple $1,000,
just to cover it, yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
enough.
I don't know if that's unforeseen.
Well, no, you did tell us here.
It was unforeseen at
Yeah.
the time of budgeting, we didn't know Jay was retiring.
Yeah,
Yeah,
all the budget and stuff were in, and then he said.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, it also would seem, to me at least, pretty clear that it's in the town's best interest to make sure that there is overlap, or if at all possible, to ensure that there's overlap between somebody filling Jay's shoes, just so that there's as much transfer of
Right.
institutional knowledge as possible.
Yeah, the FinCom
Right.
can make that.
yeah, if there's not
Yeah.
enough money in the, well, we'd have to get the expense transfer to salary approved anyway by you and FinCom, right? Yeah,
That, but that's more
It's
Yeah.
only for that one now, not us.
I think,
for a reserve fund, yeah.
no, I mean, the line item from.
The line item requires both.
Oh, yeah, line item requires the reserve.
But,
fund
but
transfer.
but, you know, the hurdle to sort of make it justifiable is a lot less.
Yeah, okay,
Thank you.
all right, thanks.
Mr. Chairman, before we go on to the next item,
I'm sorry?
Mr. Chairman, before we go on to the next item, can we ask, I think I have a feeling, the people in the back, why are they here? Maybe we can move, maybe we can move that item to talk about next rather than them sitting.
Sure.
Like the animal control officers, contract and, appointment of committees, and appointments and all that kind of stuff. It could be another hour. So, are you here for the bridge? What are you guys here for?
No, but that is one of the subjects, should we come up there?
Well, what are you here for, short?
To discuss the traffic, pattern on Chase Street.
That's not on the agenda.
No, we were told that, there would be some discussion on, other traffic issues involving the town, speed limit signs. We thought it would be-
No, yeah, if I might. So later tonight, we have a presentation of a draft map of townwide speed limits that DPW put together. So that's on the agenda. I was contacted last week on the question about posted speeds on Chase Street. I was contacted I believe it was last Wednesday. I met with Chief Durand. It turns out this has been an area of active inquiry for the last month or so, and they are actively tracking speeds. He has weeks of data, and they're continuing to do that. So I advise that the June 10th meeting will have Chief Durand's recommendations on Chase Street specifically. I said we do have a speed limit related discussion on tonight's issue, which is this townwide map. But that I want to let things play out with the chief's recommendation to have something on Chase Street specifically. So.
Hold on, now you have to get one microphone, sorry.
John, right? John,
Yes.
yeah, John, I'm sorry, I know we did meet really briefly.
Sure.
We obviously talked, and I confess I didn't recognize you.
No, that's okay.
You just don't hit the button, that little push button until it goes green. Okay.
Hi, my name is John Gregorio at 7 Chase Street here in town. We were in discussions with Selectman Parker about some of the traffic concerns that we have on our street. So we've contacted in the past the police department, and they've been kind enough to place some monitors on Chase Street in years past. And we appreciate that. However, we have 13 children, not me personally, obviously. There are 2 fine mothers in the back as well. But on the top of Chase Street, on 113, there are 13 kids, and wonderful young kids. So they all are encouraged to go outside and, right, yeah, I guess maybe just nicked. So we encourage them quite a bit to go play out in their neighborhood. So what we have found and what the kids have found and told us is that it's extremely dangerous. The cars coming off of Main Street certainly do not slow down when they hit Chase Street. That appears to be more of the issue as opposed to maybe coming from Middle up on Chase.
Going down the hill.
Yeah, and I'd certainly welcome if there's other comments from my neighbors as well, but kids are taught, as all kids should, look both ways and such. Thank goodness nothing has happened at this point, but we're looking for guidance, solutions, options to make sure that does not happen in the future. So a speed limit sign, I don't know if that'll fix it. It's welcome. We had put the Department of Public Works had put a couple of signs in the prior years, school bus stops and such, but we're a little, I don't know what the word is, concerned, aggravated, but appreciative of what's been going on from the police force as well. So we're looking for options and solutions.
Since you're a little bit into the balls than us, would it be good that they kind of maybe send an email to Jeff when he's making out his recommendations, he's going to present?
Oh, he's received everything I've gotten from
Right, so
Mr.
our
Gregorio.
thought was
Yeah.
that since that recommendation is coming in June, we thought we'd be able to just come and discuss it more, so that way there's just a little bit more input
Sure,
for
yeah.
that
Do you think
presentation.
it would be a good way maybe to have a whole little neighborhood meeting with Jeff at the police station before he makes his recommendations and just say, hey, listen, these are, where we live it.
I'd welcome it. I can't speak for the neighborhood, but I'm pretty sure we could rally the troops. And
He might want to listen to you firsthand, you might, the email's a little different than you guys sitting around, and then he could come, obviously, no email, you can.
But I believe he has met with you, Chief Durant.
I don't think I've met with him. I think I met one of the officers on the street.
Okay. So I think the recommendation 2 weeks from tonight, or actually a week from Monday, 13 days from tonight, I think we'll be happy. I think people will be happy with that. I don't want to get ahead of it because I want to let it play out. And as you know, the police department
That's
has
on
to do a certain amount of documentation in order to recommend a speed limit. So that's actively playing out. So I don't want to get ahead of where he is. But I can tell you, I met with him last Thursday, and he had literally weeks' worth of data on Chase Street. And they're continuing to build that data so that they can make a recommendation that's supported by the data. So I think people will be happy with the recommendation. So maybe we just let that play out. And then if you're not, maybe we talk neighborhood meeting. But I think, keep in mind, my office just learned about this for the first time on Wednesday afternoon. So.
Yeah.
But everyone says, on my street.
I hear it. Absolutely.
Everybody says that. So it's.
That's the beautiful thing, right?
It's not posted, which at all, which.
And
right.
there's been talk about it maybe not having
Exactly,
posted.
exactly.
Study right now.
Right, that's
I
right.
understand, the speed limit, what,
I'm sorry?
Is it thickly settled?
It's not thickly settled as the state defines it. So the default speed would be 40. I think that's more than it should be. I think that's more than what police thinks it should be, but I really don't want to get there's a process actively playing out that was in it.
Tease about that we're going to like the result, which is great, but
I'm just telling you what I'm just.
I agree. I don't want a speed limit. I actually prefer not to have a speed limit sign on there because I think people know you're not supposed to go fast on it. So if they see a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit, will people go 30? No, they'll go 35.
Don't we have, right now, the government gives us the right to put anything at 25 miles an hour that we want? 57. Only 57?
What is the application for 57?
So we've talked about speed bumps and such. There are other solutions out there that have proved to work. We can provide examples of that to you folks, yourself, or the
Well, it sounds
police
like
chief.
we're premature. When you come to that on the June 10th one, then we have a major discussion with everybody. Or I just thought that you guys would be.
That sounds great. I just don't know if that June 10th is like, well, this is it.
Won't be for me.
Okay.
If you guys have-
What do you mean?
Meaning that their recommendations at that meeting, then it's either this or you start from scratch kind of thing.
No, I don't see that, no.
I just don't know those.
And that recommendation, hypothetically, if chief came and said, hey, I think we should post speed limits because there's, I don't know, some study says
Right.
if people see something that's 30 miles an hour, you can put down children play or some other signs that help that. And, you know, that would be, we could say yes to that. That doesn't mean it ends there. We can always try to do better, yeah.
Right. I guess from our standpoint, we were just thinking that if we can be helpful before that, then we wanted to.
Wouldn't be a bad idea though, if you could, have a conversation with Jeff directly at some point before the June 10th meeting.
Can't hurt.
We have a couple ideas, and it might be nice to share some of the thoughts that we have.
Sure, and
Yeah, maybe that would be helpful.
Wayne seems
Yeah.
very knowledgeable about traffic laws.
Because my name's Lisa. I live on the corner of Chase and Main Street in the White House there, and I've had people come around off of 113, driving on the lawn, cutting. You know what I mean? Because they take that turn just fast. You know what I mean? And I understand that might be something that is difficult to control. You know what I mean? But we have we do have some thoughts and ideas about how maybe some things that could be helpful. Maybe, I don't know.
What also is interesting, I know Middle Street is on the agenda as well. Is that Middle Street I know is on the agenda as well. I'm not sure if there's been any potential studies that or looked at the increase of traffic on Chase Street, or even what's the one right next to it?
Garden Street.
It's a
Bridge.
big cut through.
Yeah.
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 So.
Well, yeah,
Let's
no,
go.
it's definitely, I mean, I can vouch for that. I live on Crane Neck Street, and, my typical route to downtown Newburyport would be to cross the bridge on Middle Street, but I can't do that right now, so now, sorry, but I go slow.
I don't doubt it. I think that's something that maybe perhaps is going to be, it'd be nice to hear about the update as well, so.
And I do think that the traffic goes just as fast from Middle Street up towards Main Street. I don't think it's always just going from Main Street down. It's just, so.
You're not the only, I'm not saying lessen your concerns, but we have a bunch of farm roads that people, you know what I mean?
Oh, I get it. I know, back roads. I get it.
Back roads that are like on Main,
Yep.
off of Main Streets, and you're like, you know what I mean? If they don't lend themselves to,
Right.
quite honestly, I'm glad I live on that end, because I will be here like you guys.
Well,
And that's the thing, the density, I mean, they're all kids. Like, these are all, they're not.
I'm scared for my own life. You kidding?
Yeah, that's true too.
And then one other thing too, I think that we should mention is that Chase Street is a huge turnaround street. I don't know if people miss going to Newburyport. They get to that point, they turn around, they're in my driveway, they're across the street, they're then in John's driveway, they're in Allison's driveway. We put cones, we've done the experiment, we sit outside and watch and we laugh, right? It's like, we put the cars, my husband parks the car a certain way so they don't turn in mine. So then what do? They turn across the street, and then the cone goes up, and then they go down to John's. It's totally, there's a lot of activity just with cars going in and out of there, and maybe some of the ideas we have would help with some of that, I don't know. So just something to think about.
Yeah, it's, even if something is decided next meeting, it doesn't mean it can't be revisited in August. That's the point.
Is there a reason to not hear the ideas tonight? Is there a reason not to hear their ideas tonight? That way, just try to save a step.
Well, they
Like
want to.
okay.
Presented with the people that know what they're talking
Okay.
about.
All right.
And that's fine, and thank you for saying that it won't be officially done on that next meeting. I think,
Well,
again,
it could be officially done on the next meeting, I wouldn't be saying, but it's official, but it's always a process.
Right.
And I think that needs to be, we might want to start something.
I think that's where I'm getting at, is that we just want to create a sense of urgency, is that it's great to prolong it, but again, these kids are out there day in and day out right now with the good weather, so.
Yeah, so if, you know, if we do something and it clearly isn't working, then we revisit.
Yeah.
You know,
Well,
take
That's
another
what
look.
that's what we're doing at
Georgetown.
Georgetown and.
We've been working on that.
We changed, we tried to reposition the stop signs and added more signs and.
This idea we have might actually help there too. I don't know.
Yep.
So, be helpful.
So
It all
should we
works
wait-
until we start ticketing all your neighbors. That's it, when everybody
I'm fine with
comes in
that.
and they-
I'm totally fine with that. Go
And
ahead.
And then we can start getting phone calls, and then phone calls, and give too many tickets out to all the neighborhoods.
That's revenue, isn't it?
So should we contact Chief or?
No, I've already got your information. I've
Okay.
provided it to him. I'll have him follow up with you.
Excellent. Thank you
All
very
right.
much.
Thank you, thanks.
Oh, yeah.
Richard or for the bridge?
The Middle Street Bridge.
Yeah, I'm sorry,
If you want to hear, we can, if you want to hear about what's happening with the bridge, we can talk about that.
That'd be wonderful.
Angus, you wanted to?
Well, unfortunately, there's not much more to say than there was 2 weeks ago, but to catch everyone up to speed, we've been working really closely with Newburyport going back to last summer so they got a small bridge grant that's been working toward design. We got conceptual designs about 6 to 8 weeks ago. We reviewed them at a staff level, and there were some real issues. So we sent back some comments. We got some follow-up conceptual designs that were closer to the mark, but of the 5 concepts, only one had any provision for pedestrian access. Only one had any sidewalks, and it had 2 sidewalks. So we circled back immediately, I think within the day, and said we'd really like an updated concept with just 1 sidewalk, so that we know what the cost estimate would be for that. Basically, we've had, so Newburyport has really, so let me back up. We had a public meeting date scheduled that was going to be May 21st, and we'd spent probably a month coordinating that date with the mayor's office, coordinating there's a lot of logistics of that, and then just out of the blue, they pulled the plug on that, said, oh, they're real busy with budget season. We think there's a concern in Newburyport now that they have conceptual costs or conceptual designs with cost estimates. We think there's a concern about funding. And so, I've been 2 or 3 times a week, I reach out to the mayor's office, and up until 6 weeks ago, we'd been in contact weekly. I mean, it was no issue. And now all of a sudden, I don't know if it's they're busy with their budget or what's going on, but they won't get back to us in terms of rescheduling a meeting date. In a call that I had with the mayor about 5 weeks ago, we agreed in terms of the public meeting that my office would take the lead on drafting a press release. I did that. I sent a draft. We haven't gotten comments back on the draft press release. We've given them a week of said anytime, I think the 2nd week of June, any night that week would work for us. We've gotten non-response. We've gotten nothing further from the designer, who, by the way, does not work for us. The contract is between the engineering firm and the city of Newburyport. We are not a client. We don't have the ability to go directly to the engineer. So the point is, for the last 6 to 8 weeks, we've kind of been floundering because we can't get a meeting set. We can't get an updated conceptual design with a cost estimate with a single sidewalk. And so that's unfortunately all I have to say tonight. I'm going to keep at it. And there is a provision in Mass General Law that does provide for, in the event of a bridge spanning 2 municipalities, there is a provision for deciding on design and cost share that's set out in Mass General Law. We'd like not to go that route, but we need to get the bridge fixed. So we're trying to get it onto their agenda, but they're in the middle of budget season. Their budget vote, I believe, is June 10th. So they're kind of, you know, we don't know what's really going on, but that's what we're being told.
Could they be having designs and pitching them?
No.
Could they have design, hypothetically, could they have designs and looking at the cost, deciding what's good for them, in theory, and then be picking them, and then only presenting us with, you know, these are the choices? Could that happen?
I suppose it's theoretically possible. Obviously, it's all public information, so if we asked for any subsequent designs, they would produce them. I have no reason to think that's happened. My assumption is that the engineer has been put in a holding pattern for going on probably almost 2 months now, 6 weeks anyway, and which we're not happy about. They got a small bridge grant from the Commonwealth for $500,000. That's what's funding the engineering costs.
Yeah, the study, the geotechnical work and the design.
Design of the bridge, but then the actual construction?
Well, that's
There's no grant money for that.
right. Well, there is going to be a grant that we're going to go after, but the discussions so far have been, you know, between the board and the mayor's office through me, and with the idea of setting out the cost share, and how grant funds would be credited if grant funds are received and all of that. So there is a draft memorandum of understanding that's been, that has not been signed.
That we made 2 months.
No, back in January. That was sent, that was,
Trying to do that.
So they're dragging their,
it seems like it. I would
they have
acknowledge.
that they don't want. Are they expressed?
Well, if you were a West Newbury person or a Newbury person, who would you want? Be more West Newbury?
We have more incentive.
I would assume that 90% of the interest is people from West Newbury wanting to use it as an exit from West Newbury, rather than people going down Turkey Hill Road and stuff to get to that and go into West Newbury from Newbury. I don't think there's that much interest for that.
And when you have multiple things that you have to pay for, you've seen, Newbury Port, the streets and this and that. I mean, they must have a list too. And
You can look at
probably not on the top of
their capital budget was in the newspaper yesterday, and I don't see any great changes on it. If you do a better bridge, I can.
So we're doing the best we possibly can, and Angus has been working feverishly on it.
Yeah, I mean, I had it on the agenda. I've made them aware a couple of times, just in the last week alone, that it was going to be on tonight's agenda. I would like to have something substantive to report in terms of a date or potential dates, and I can't, you know, it's unfortunate because we'd been in touch with them probably 2 or 3 times a week for a period of months on this project. I mean, we were actively working together, you know, bi-weekly conference calls, site walks, it was all going forward, and then it's,
Think that we could share that cost, and that speeds it up for them?
no, that's would be assumed. They would make, that would be assumed.
It's been,
Not the construction.
it's been measured in terms of who owns what.
Yeah, we had a survey, property survey was part of it.
Ownership of the bridge. So,
But they have a grant to do the design.
That's right.
that's correct. Nothing to do with the construction.
So why is that grant just in their name and not yours?
They applied for it.
Can we apply for it?
The state's not going to give 2 grants on the same bridge.
Like, is there an expiration date that they have to use it by?
Oh, they're well within that. I mean, they just signed the contract with the designer in September, so it's not, you know, in terms of these types of projects, it you know, the Commonwealth isn't going to feel that this is taking any longer than they would expect.
Well, thank you for your assistance.
You know, I mean, we'll keep at it. I don't, you know, I would have liked to have a date I could give you so we can get something on the calendar. We've got a press release already drafted for once we have a date, but we can't, you know, we're, I mean, you know, and honestly, just, I mean, if you turn the clock back 6 or 8 weeks and we were in the thick of budget season and our FinCom booklet, I don't want to assume that it's not because they're just totally stretched with their budget. I don't know. But it's been a while at this point that,
Well, anything we have control of, we're working very hard on.
yeah.
Thank you.
So we all need
So
to
we-
refresh our new report, apparently.
Well, coming out of this meeting, I will follow up with the mayor's office and let her know that, or let her office know that there's a lot of impatience to get a date scheduled, and and I've also recommended to her that we set up a separate meeting to deal with the cost share, and that we do that. I've made myself available at any time at their convenience, and would continue to try to get that meeting.
We do. That's right. Those trips across the, those trips across the Artichoke River involve dollars going to Newburyport typically, so.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There is a page linked from the DPW webpage with updates on the bridge. As I say that, I think it's probably been 2 months since I posted anything new to it, so it's a little bit stale, but there are a few memos that go back to last summer that kind of set out some of the basics of the project, and I'll make a point to add some new, we've had a couple of memos to the board since then that we could post to the webpage. So it's linked from the DPW site.
Thank you all.
Next item on the agenda is review of the animal control officer memorandum of understanding with the city of Newburyport.
So the document before you, I had Mike review this, and he confirmed this is substantially identical to what has been approved in prior years. The only difference is that it does specify in Article 8 the provision of the 2015 Ford Explorer. That's as was reviewed by the board earlier this year in terms of making the oldest police vehicle available as the new ACO vehicle. So Chief Durant has been moving forward with with scheduling the modifications to that vehicle to make it suitable as an ACO vehicle. And the Newburyport Department of Public Services, which includes their auto mechanics, they've looked at it. They're doing a lot of work on it as well at their own cost. So that Article 8 specifies that vehicle, but other than that, it should be familiar to you from prior agreements.
Just fortuitously, I was reading the Mass Municipal, the Beacon, yesterday. There was a thing about sharing, and I just wondered, perhaps we're doing it already, but basically it said that most shared services, materials, and facilities may not be adequately covered by their current municipal property and casualty insurance agreements, and the municipality should consider whether to request that it be named as an additional insured on their liability insurance policy of the entity to whom it's lending or sharing equipment or its personnel. So in other words, should we be named as an additional insured on Newburyport's policy because they are using our truck? I'm not trying to quarter monkey wrench in anything. I just happen to see that.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you bring it up.
Something that's sort of like what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Except for it's the opposite.
Both
Our
ways.
vehicle for which we have insurance. They should be asking to be an additional insured on our insurance, because we're paying insurance.
That's right.
What's not okay? Okay.
And then is there liability insurance on the?
But what if the animal control officer does something, it gets in an accident in West Newbury, what happens then?
Oh. It's insured
By them or us?
by us, for automobile. But all other insurance and other aspects are covered by their insurance.
So like if the animal control officer went out and hit somebody, I mean, like not in the car, but punch someone, and there was liability, there would be, he's their employee and they're responsible for it.
It's not a bad idea to bounce this off our insurer and see if we ought to be.
I mean,
I would have no objection to tabling this.
No. I mean, it might be something that they might want to ask us to be an additional insured on our insurance, because we're the ones who cover the insurance on the automobile.
But in principle, do you need us to vote on this?
Sometime, we need to execute it sometime before the end of the fiscal year, but if the board would like to table it for 2 weeks, I would have no concern about that.
I have just one real minor note. In Article 6, it refers to the town of Newbury instead of the town of West Newbury.
Okay, oh, good catch, yep. I read this too, and I missed that one, so.
Give them a good deal.
Okay, you want to get the insurance thing cleared up before we sign it?
No, but because
I think
there's no reason we can't do that also, yeah. No one would object to that.
No.
I make a motion that we approve this, intermunicipal agreement for the administration of shooting co-op services with member report.
I would second that.
Further discussion? I would like to investigate a little bit further if there's any reason to do this, but ask Maya, but it doesn't stop us from doing it. Go ahead with the agreement.
I will definitely ask Maya.
All in favor? Aye.
Thank you.
So is this a draft?
I want to fix that typo in Article 6, and so I'll have this for you for signature at the next meeting.
Okay. Committee appointments.
Are we doing these appointments tonight, or are we talking?
Well, you have before you those who have expressed interest. We, as noted in here, and Mike can elaborate if he wishes, but I asked his office to help with reaching out, which I really appreciate he has. He and Diane have sent out the letters for reappointments, and they were sent out probably 2.5 weeks ago, roughly. Is that so?
Like 16th or so.
Okay. Yes, a couple of weeks ago.
And
So,
have we put a deadline on you keep on telling people, hey, we want to know, no, and like other people that might want to be considered.
Right.
That are filled.
Mhm.
We put a deadline on that side. I mean, the town people should know, saying, hey, if you're interested in anything, you have to get your name in for a specific committee by this date, and then we're going to approve. I wouldn't want to approve anybody's time unless we've done that. We could have more people who want. It's good that we have the people that are already on the boards that are interested in it, but it's kind of disingenuous if we tell people, hey, we need people for boards and committees, and then when they send a note in, we say, oh, no, I'm sorry, we already approved it. When was the?
Yeah, did we get a time limit on it?
what did the letter specify?
So the letter was just out to people that were already on the boards. Yeah. So we keep on sending out on our website and even our submissions that we need people for boards and committees, we're going to start appointing them soon. So we need to tell people, hey, we're going to start appointing them on June 10th at our next meeting or whatever. If you have any interest in any boards and committees, please get those in.
Okay, well, I guess we could put it on the website and an email blast.
I think that would be just fair, wouldn't you? We keep on telling people to put their names in.
Okay.
If we have a friend, we should have some. If it was already
And we,
on that,
and you had one tonight of somebody who wanted to be appointed on the board, so.
Amy Friend with the Cultural Commission, or Cultural Council.
we should. That and the bicentennial was fair.
But those were reappointments. I think
Those
he's
were
talking
all
about a
reappointments.
new appointment.
Yeah, that's my point though. If you have more people, if they want to be reappointed. But what happens if we don't want to reappoint them? Or somebody else comes?
I think the bicentennial.
I want to reappoint all of them. My example, we say, hey, and then we say, hey, we want people on boards and committees. And Just because they're reappointed, we reported them all, I wanna be on the Bicentennial Committee. Oh, we already, there's no more room.
Oh, you could,
I'm just using this example, I know you,
I think that's there's an exception because they're such in the thick of things right now, and
well, their appointment doesn't even run out until the end of June.
No, but Glenn, the bicentennial, they need to be,
they're just an exception. But I see your point with every other board, you know. There are some other people who may be interested to express it. But the idea is that we do want to get, I mean, today we got our first rejection from a board member, you know, said, I'm done with it, you know, I don't want to be reappointed, so.
So,
Anything else those two?
If you want them, I mean, but.
Just so you have to understand what's going on.
Yeah, it would be interesting.
Maybe that might.
If somebody's actively reaching out and saying, I don't want to be.
Well, I mean, my letter was said basically, if, you know, to ask, is please, you know, send it, and said it had a check off, yes or no,
Right.
and one person checked off no, so.
Yeah.
But I have, all those available, anyone wants to do it, if I want, I can make copies of what I've gotten back, if that's something you'd be interested in, and.
so Mike and our intent has been to bring forward on June 10th the complete list of all the committees, members, current memberships, expiring memberships, reappointments, just like you've seen in the past. But the question was asked at the last board meeting about this, so I felt that since we had some in, that we'd chip away at them. If that's not the intent of the board, that's fine, but that was the intent. It's just where we have some in hand, we bring them to you, and that way it's not all on June 10th. But
We haven't told people, about that. Tonight we were asking people that we need people for boards and committees, so I think we need to make a date.
okay, so let's make.
Somebody might not even do it, but,
Well, then, the next meeting, we are going to be people who express interest, in, you know, continuing on committees. Next meeting.
so that's June, so it's the Wednesday before June 10th, that's when our, packet vote is, right?
that's right, which is a week from tomorrow, which is, June 5th, I believe.
This is, so do we want to say anybody's interested in being on any committees, you have to have anybody from 5th? I just picked it out of the
I know, is that enough time? Well,
They do need to be done in June,
we do need to get them in there, yeah.
or at the end of noon of Friday. I kind of want to look at them.
Yeah, I
You
mean,
know what I mean? I don't want the day of.
no. Okay, yeah, that's, we're gonna go a little bit. So what day is it?
Why don't we do this? Why don't we do it at the end of business on Thursday? If we just give somebody at least, you know, he could get one at 11:59.
Okay.
You know, I mean, he's trying to organize a packet for us.
So what date is that?
That's the 6th.
That's what we put that on our website, and those announcements we send out to everybody who's on emails and stuff. Sign up for emails and things for the town. Do that, I don't know, automatically.
If you check a box, it does. For most of the posts that we post, that we do the email. Occasionally we don't, but for the most part, yes.
I guess we have no idea yet where they're gonna be, holes. You know, people not enough people.
We have a working list of current committee and commission vacancies. So I think without new people, we know those will be holes. And that's, Mike and I started to work on that list last week, and we just didn't get there with everything else.
We can talk about that, right?
Yes.
Okay.
The other one here would be that school representative one, correct?
Yeah,
Yes. Yep.
So, okay, what is that now? that board has been, are you talking about this, the school finance board?
No, the one above high school.
Oh,
The one that I was, But see, that's a tough one to do, right? Don't we now have to send that into the state? Is it tough to change members, or it's not really
No.
tough? There is a process.
There's a process, yeah.
You have to send it into the state.
oh, the school building committee, okay, all right.
They approve it, or?
Well, and it's interesting as you, because of course you're correct that that's got a selectman designee, but that's an example of this board and committee list, that committee's not in there. There's some issues with that list, and that's part of why we haven't got, because there's some issues. So that's one of them, that committee's not actually in that. So there's a database that you've seen in the past with the committees.
Yeah.
It's not how I would have set it up.
Complete.
It's not, it's got some issues. So it's not like a matter of just printing it up, because as I've proofed it and as Mike's proofed it, we both found some issues. So, and one of them being that the school building committee, Glenn's absolutely right. Of course, the selectmen have a designee, but as I think of it, the reason I didn't put that in my memo is I was working from the database instead of my head, so.
But it also one of the selectmen offices that they've given up between themselves, which has been kind of separate.
Yeah,
I mean, it can be a different.
those probably weren't on the list simply because, Mike's point, the list was sort of to help us pick people rather than we at least know which committee we're on.
Yeah.
Some of the times.
Do you want to make these tonight, or you want to have Angus get back to us on completeness?
Well, I think in terms of the selectmen appointments, the ones we have here are Capital Improvement Committee, Community Preservation Committee, Investment Policy Committee, now School Building Committee. We have Stormwater Regulation Committee, which I'm recommending that we don't reappoint. I think that's become somewhat defunct in my observation. So I think if you want to go forward with those, that would be one less thing to do at the next meeting. But if there's a reason to table that, you could take those up at the next meeting instead.
So, anyone have any comments about what they want to do or what?
I'd be interested in school building committee, and I don't know what other, so it looks like there are a total of 4 appointments, and are these shown?
Well, I was only on the investment policy committee. I've only been to like one meeting, so I can't really.
Did you like it though?
Yeah, I would do it again. Yeah, we just sort of started it. Yeah.
I'd also be interested in CPC if
Well, I'm on the cap. If you take the school committee away from me, that's fine.
Yeah.
But I want to be on the CPC rather than the capital improvements. I'd rather change these, because I haven't been on that in a while. If you wouldn't mind.
okay.
But I really, really want to be on the school one, so that's a big thing.
Oh, you do? Okay.
I really want to be on it, but if you really want to be on it, I'm flexible. You know what I mean? You know what I mean?
Well,
It might be good to have a different voice from us, I don't know. So, that's up to you.
I understand.
We choose the first Tuesday in every month.
Yeah.
Right, Angus? That's right. So if that, I don't know if that matters to you. So, if you want to take the capital improvements in the school, I'll take the CPC. Think about it, unless you really want to take the CPC, I'll stay in the school. Want to decide this next meeting?
Yeah, probably, think about it, if that's okay.
School,
Think about it for the next meeting, is that good?
Fine, whatever you want. I'll do whatever you want, but, the school thing might not be as interesting to you now than, the CPC, because, aren't we kind of just picking, windows and drapes at this point, in colors?
There's an element of that,
I'm not
yeah.
even trying to be funny, so I don't know how much you think, you know what I mean? It's already kind of set in stone, correct?
In terms of, well, I mean, the architect said as much as the committee does or doesn't want to get into the details, that's what they'll do. But in terms of who actually in terms of the nature of the decisions to be made, I think it's more cosmetic than, yeah. I think the building footprint's set, the square footage is set, a lot of those things are set.
Because you have to have those set, because that was the thing that was approved at the school building.
Exactly.
If you change anything out, then the funding goes.
Yeah,
Exactly.
By the way, just to kind of follow up on conversation from the last meeting, Angus was at the meeting, which was the next night, I think. And I was there. You weren't there, were you? No, okay. What was new information that I learned was that even if there was a new grant program or, something pending that the state was going to do relative specifically to using geothermal energy for heating, sort of notwithstanding everything else, all the other concerns that have been stated by the state, by the governor and by the legislature about, reducing our greenhouse gas footprint, that the money is the money is the money, and the school building, what's the state acronym? School Building Authority has allocated a certain amount of state money, and if we find other sources for state money that specifically support other projects, all that does is lower the money we get from the SBA. They've sort of set a maximum number that we can get from the state, and so no matter what the other sources are, all they're going to do is push down. So there's no net gain in terms of funding. And it would clearly cost more to include geothermal in the original design, so it would end up costing more than the three towns have budgeted. So that wouldn't work.
We can do it next week, and next meeting, fine. But I just didn't want, whatever, the school building one, basically, I think it's down to.
Yeah, okay,
Drapes and colors.
okay.
Okay, so we'll bring this one back for the next meeting, and I'll also include in there the information about what the time commitment is roughly in terms of how often the committees meet, and so that you'll have all that information.
That would be good.
I believe that brings us to item J. So what you have, this is something that, as you know, there's, as was talked about earlier tonight, the issue of speed limits is a continuing issue that comes up regularly in different parts of town, and so Wayne had worked with MVPC to put together, for the first time, a map showing everything in one place in terms of the posted speeds. And we talked a little bit earlier tonight. Yeah, the paper copy's not real clear because you don't have the color, but in your emailed packet, it's all color-coded. But I was surprised at the number of streets that don't have a posted speed limit, which in that instance, it reverts to state statute, which basically sets a limit of 30 miles an hour in thickly settled areas and 40 miles outside thickly settled areas. But as you know, there's essentially nothing in town that qualifies as thickly settled under the state guidelines. So anything not posted would have a default speed of 40, which was surprising to me. So I think this is instructive. There's probably a lot to talk about within this, and but I wanted to share the draft and let you know this is a work in progress.
Now we're on L. Talk about L.
Okay, so L is just to make it's two things. First, it's to make the board aware that there's quite a lot of time and effort going toward the bicentennial events in July. There's a week-long series of events planned, but with a real focus on this July 13th Field Day. This is it's a really exciting event, but it's also it's a lot of logistical planning to put something like this together, in particular to do with parking, but also things like lighting and people getting safely back to their cars after the fireworks, where this is not an illuminated area. Chief Duran checked the moon cycles at one of the meetings we had, and it looks like the moon will be favorable in terms of that it's not going to be like pitch dark. So, but this just really to bring you into the kind of make sure you're aware that between my office, police, fire, DPW, we're really focused on this. We've had, I think, 4 meetings in the last 2 weeks, and we'll have more, some with the committee, some without the committee, but just trying to think through the entire event, make sure we're not overlooking anything. And I think the biggest concerns that have arisen are clearly to do with parking. We just don't have much parking capacity in that immediate vicinity. The Bicentennial Committee has costed out providing shuttle service and offering satellite parking both in this location and at the high school. And I think they will go ahead with that, but I don't personally want to be over-reliant on that because I don't know in practice, how many people will take advantage of that. And we have no way of knowing what's going to be the attendance. And so I keep telling everyone, we need to, if there's 1,000 people or 1,200 people or 1,500 people, we need to have thought that through, because if we haven't and it ends up being a real mess, that's not good.
What about, I'm sure it's come out, like across the street?
Well, yeah, of course. No, I mean, that's option number one, but the total spaces on page is less than 200. So that's our workhorse, but that's not going to do it.
So what's going on, you mentioned about,
Yeah, so there's a portion, so before I get to that, there's a portion on the Mill Pond site that's, there's a meeting in the Mill Pond Committee tomorrow night. Wayne will attend along with representatives of the Bicentennial Committee to request that they expand the allowable parking on the Mill Pond location for the day of event. And so Wayne's been out there and kind of scoped out and mapped out what he thinks is supportable in terms of parking beyond the traditional parking on the Mill Pond site. So we're going to be looking for the
Low or sort of the halfway?
the halfway. So I think the area down low we would take advantage of, but we wouldn't make known as public parking. That would be kind of where volunteers or vendors, we might direct them down to the Mill Pond building and have them walk up, but we don't want to, have a lot of people driving down and through there because there's not a lot of space there. So that's got to be more controlled, but that's,
Like, 200 people trying to drive up that at night, that narrow, it's not good.
yeah, and it's not like we have there's a lot of volunteer time going into planning the event, but on the day of, I'm not counting on the fact that we're going to have like parking monitors in each location to control kind of directing people like you would see at a major festival or like an outdoor concert. I don't think we're going to have the manpower for that. So what I've put on the agenda is a request for authorization to use the Dunn property with access off Chase Street for day of event parking. I don't know if that's going to work. DPW director has some real concerns about it. It's not designed for parking. Even if the access can be improved, the field itself is very rutted. There's a license agreement, so we would need to essentially take back the rights for a period of time to a certain portion. But even if you could solve all that, is that safe for people to walk from there to and from the main activity area up at Pipestave? These are all things where, I'm sorry?
where's the main activity area?
Around the, in the vicinity of the riding rings.
So in the parking lot?
In the parking lot, within the rings, and yeah.
Nothing on the field?
They're going to have, my understanding is on the baseball fields, they'll have some like reenactors at one point during the day. But the soccer fields, that's going to be up close to the DPW yard. The soccer fields are going to be off limits because those are within range of the fireworks. So there's going to be restricted access with, snow fencing set up for a perimeter around the fireworks, which will happen that night. So basically, there's a lot of questions. I don't want it on the day of to be hundreds of people driving around with no place to park. That would be a real problem. And where.
Okay, so how we do?
Well, so I would look to authorization to use the Dunn property if it's determined to be feasible. It may not.
You say the license agreement, that's the one we have that plans for, plans there?
Yep.
So I didn't realize it still stood, that there was still an agreement there for him to use the,
I don't have a signed agreement.
It's a Colby?
Yep.
Yeah. I mean,
That was a 1 year thing.
Yeah, I think he pays it. He does, yeah. Yeah, it's only no game, you're not like corn.
no, it's just a.
And it does provide the town essentially unfettered rights to the land. I mean, so if we say, hey, for this period of time, this designated area is, earmarked for parking, that's within our rights. When I talk about feasibility, I'm really talking about both the physical, is it too rutted to direct people there? And if we can direct people there to park, can we provide safe pedestrian access from there to and from? I know it's not ideal. That it's.
How many extra cars?
Sorry?
How many extra cars? Is it worth it if you get 500? Probably. If it's worth it if we get extra 50? Probably not.
that's how it sustain 500 cars, that much traffic. And you gotta think about if it's gonna be wet.
Well, that's
But if it's wet, that totally goes out the door. I mean,
and we understand
it's
that.
been-
That's
yeah.
yeah. That's all of this is contingent on dry weather leading up to the event, but it can't be too dry because if it's drought conditions, Chief Dwyer will have concerns about the fireworks. So we're trying to thread a lot of needles, and yeah, the issue of weather and wetness of the fields is definitely. We understand that any use of this would be contingent on, if it rains 2 days before, heavy rain, that's a non-starter. In which case, the only designated parking we have in walking distance to this location is Page School and the Mill Pond property. Because
You're not allowing any parking in Pipes there?
just handicap parking,
In the select?
I don't believe they've resolved that, but so handicap parking, because the DPW yard's going to be set aside for emergency responders, and there's going to be a tent there for hydration and first aid. So yeah, we have real concerns about that's where the dumpster's going to be set up.
Not much space there.
So the DPW, is that available?
No, that's for the ambulances, for the first aid tent. That's my understanding.
Wait, so, what do you want?
Well, so
I
it,
would say yes under all the.
yeah, that's what I'm looking for.
Whatever we can do.
Yeah,
Right.
I would say yes, and it sounds like you have it all thought out. Because
Well-
obviously, if it works and it's dry enough and it's this and it's that and it's that, it's all gonna work.
Mhm.
But if you go down there and assess it with Wayne and say, this is ridiculous, it's not gonna work, then it's not gonna work.
And that's exactly
What
what.
about in terms of, it's half as far is to, have a shuttle from Bachelor. Doesn't hold as many cars, but.
Here
From-
and there. 20 back there, without 100. They take the shuttle, they get a free ice cream.
What,
Well, that's another.
would you, would you consider that maybe we should, figure out the number of spaces and then get for residents, I guess, would be first,
parking pass?
I did bring that up at one of the meetings. The idea didn't go over very well.
Because then you could designate, you could say, okay, we give out 200 spaces for day school, you'd get it, so each car that would come in would have to have its pass.
But how many passes per household?
One.
I will bring it up again. But you know, one of the concerns I brought it up at a meeting with the committee. You know, part of the concern is the manpower associated with enforcing that on the day of.
Yeah, it's easy for us to sit here and make all these suggestions, that, how they're gonna be all applied.
Yeah, this is something. This is a huge undertaking, and between myself and the two chiefs and Wayne, we are really.
Because we haven't done it before.
We've never done anything of this scale. And we just don't know. I mean, if 300 people show up, great, everyone has a great time. If 1,500 people show up, in my view, from where I sit, we need to have thought that through. That's the biggest issue, but yeah, it extends through, you know, pedestrian safety to and from the parking, lighting, you know, so people can get to where they're going. This goes to 11 p.m. Yeah, we're arranging for portable lighting.
Lots of I love fireworks, and so I've been to a lot, and there's lots of places that you're falling over rocks or whatever. I mean, obviously, we won't think people get hurt, but I think people bring flashlights and stuff so that they know that they're not. It's not Times Square.
We need to start saying there will be no parking. There will be no parking the day of the event at Pike State.
So, so the committee is working toward a townwide mailing that is gonna set out all of this. That's gonna be mailed to every household in town.
What do you think? We're gonna set about August, September?
No, in June. Toward you know, second half of June.
It starts on July 6th.
Yep.
They need to send this out.
Does it make sense to, and again, you know, I know there's an issue with monitoring parking areas, but does it make sense to have a limit on, you know, no single passenger cars or something like that, just to try to bump the head count per car up and the number of cars down a little bit?
I certainly think it would be very smart to encourage that in the mailing and in any publicity for the event. In terms of enforcing that, I think that puts, first of all, we don't have the manpower, A, and B, even if we have a handful of people on the day of who agree to be essentially parking, you know, monitors, that puts them in a really tough spot to send someone away. Exactly. I mean, what, you know, right. Do you want to?
You're going to have, you know, 1,000 people trying to go to paid school.
Yeah. That's why I'm sweating this.
But that's if you said you can only go there if you have a pass, then maybe that would limit it, you know?
But who's going to get that message?
It doesn't, you have a big sign, you have a big sign.
Local residents will get that message.
Yes.
Out of town probably won't get that message.
And they'll be directed, and they can't park there, and they'll be directed to a shuttle place.
So this is, yeah, we need a lot more day of volunteers to enforce. I don't disagree with that at all. I just am not getting the sense that we've got some significant number of people who are prepared to spend 10 hours, 12 hours. They're 11 a.m. to 11 p.m. I mean, this is a...
Yeah.
You're going to have a way of people at the beginning.
So do you think that people are going to be there, like, I would think that the big crowd would be the fireworks versus...
My guess is you'll have a lot of people, I think you'll have a lot of people from noon to 4, because you're going to have food, you'll have bands, you'll have a lot of field day type things, and I think you'll have a lot of people leave between 4 and 6 and come back at 8, 8:30. That's my guess. you'll have 2 surges. And we're trying to think it all through, but it's basically me, the chiefs, and Wayne, all of whom, as you know, we don't have full-time hours to put toward this event, but that's what we're trying to figure out, because it's a major event.
Much to figure out. And that's it. We don't have the parking, so we have to do something. So, I don't know what it is, but, I mean, it's Mill Pond,
There is no other place
other than the high school.
other than the high school.
Right. So setting up a shuttle is definitely, the committee's looking at that and is costing that out, but even that just came out of a suggestion that, at the staff level, that we made about 2 weeks ago. So, Yep.
And that's gonna be tough, because when things wind down after the fireworks, if there are 1,000 people looking to vacate, and, you know, and 400 of them wanna get back to here for the
Yep.
show.
Yep.
Yeah.
They have to wait.
Well, is there any, let's brainstorm for a second, is there any other parking in the town?
It's the same problem as the Dunn Farm, but you'd have Long Hill. As an open field.
It's a more accessible field.
The only other place would be All Saints Church, obviously has at least a number of spaces there.
Out back, but we can't count on that, because
I know.
they rent that out to the apartment owner. They probably have only 25, 30 back there.
And, you know, they'd have to kick out.
Yeah, then our best.
The only other places you have is obviously the center of town, the churches, and,
Here,
oh, this one, yeah. This one has an area where you can have.
Speaking of, this probably is a non-starter, but I'll say anyway, speaking of park and ride, on Saturday night in Newburyport, would there be anything that would prevent people from parking there and running a shuttle bus from there?
Have you seen that place?
On Saturday
On the
night.
grass.
On
It's-
Saturday night.
No, every day. It's
On Saturday night?
It's 100% full.
they stopped, Rick, they stopped the into Boston one.
I understand that, I know what it's like during the day, I was just thinking, I didn't realize on Saturday night that it was like that, I guess.
No, they stopped the commuters, the guy wasn't, they don't even stop there for the going to Boston.
The coach company stopped its buses.
They stopped
Yeah.
there. So
Right,
everybody
right,
that you
there's a
see
parking
there
lot.
is people going to the airport. And it's long.
And it's, whatever reason, is that it's 80% full 100% of the time.
Yeah.
And sometimes 110%
You know
full.
the Episcopal Church?
Yeah.
You know the Episcopal Church? That parking lot behind that they built when they found that $1 million painting, whatever? They rent that parking lot out
To C&J.
Oh,
to
did they
T&J,
really?
and they have, today, they probably have 15 cars in it.
So the current thinking, and the bicentennial committee met earlier tonight at 6, so maybe something new came out of that, but the direction that we're working with is try to get as many spaces as possible within walking distance of the event, A, and B, set up a shuttle that's gonna head west, that would stop here, that would stop at the high school, and that would just do that run all day.
A truck, a bus.
Bus, and there would be 2 buses. So people would have,
Golf bus, like a school bus.
yeah. Yeah, so there'd be some regularity, but it's not gonna avoid the scenario of, at the end of the night, a backup, but that's, is what it is, yep.
We could sit here for another 5 hours, we're not gonna work that out.
Yep.
Sounds like.
Do we know if the, school committee will let us do that?
Yeah, that's all been worked out with them, yep.
And
I actually could think of something.
no, you said this was gonna be a short meeting.
No, okay.
I mean, we can sit here for another hour and a half, and we're not gonna figure the parking thing out.
No.
So, but, hold on, so we get something out of this? The request, the only thing he was asking us to do is it okay for him to look in to see if it's feasible at, down, that's what he's asking.
That's right. Yeah, just so that if it works out, that we don't have to come back and get a vote in a couple of weeks. That was really just kinda,
Yes.
yeah, great. All right, so I'll call that.
All right, I just wanted to try to get something good.
Good, thank you, Glenn. Yeah. So that's, Rick, I'm going to put you down as the second, if that's, all right,
Sounds good.
great. Okay, next item on the agenda is just, there was a meeting that Bob Janes convened Thursday evening, and, we knew that was coming up, and so I put it on here just really as kind of an open forum with the board to just share information about what was talked about that night, what is being considered both at the Car Post Committee level and in my office. And I know Rick was there Thursday, I believe, for the entire thing. I only arrived late. My daughter had her open house that night, so I was there for maybe the last 20, 25 minutes. So, Rick, do you want to summarize what I missed, or just kind of summarize?
Gotta think back. So there was really just trying to break the concept of doing something with a building down into segments, and then people taking responsibility for getting information on the different segments, and among that was thinking about if there was significant work done on the building, how can you break it? John McGrath actually had sort of broken it down into 3 different segments, and then there was some discussion of what is the purpose, and the sort of acknowledging what the purpose is of the building. If we're going to sink money into it, the understanding that was explained at that meeting was that it was essentially to honor all veterans, all people who have served, and the assumption was that was an understanding in the town. I think that needs to be fleshed out. Personally, I think that needs to be fleshed out, make sure everybody has the same understanding of what the purpose would be of significant investment in the building. And that's not a statement one way or the other by me. It's just I think everybody needs to understand what are we doing exactly.
So my thought is I think that the town, whether that's this board, whether that's my office, the Car Post Committee, whomever, the town collectively, I feel, needs to, at some point, sooner than later, give the voters the option to invest in the building. And to do that, they're going to need to know, the people will need to know what will it cost to get the building to where it's code compliant and occupiable, not obviously as a residence, but usable building. And I think we're going to need expert advice on that. I did reach out to Lynn Spencer. She's the principal of Spencer Sullivan and Vogt, which is the one that did the report in 2014. Leading the stabilization work. I talked to her back on May 9th. Actually, no, I followed up with an email to her on May 9th. I'd talked to her a couple of weeks prior to that, and I'd asked her to give kind of a range of what might the cost be for her firm or a firm like hers to work up cost estimates that would be adequate to bring to town meeting to make a decision of whether to invest in restoring the building. But I think that we need to do that, because I think if we don't do that, time's not on our side. And if the building ends up failing, I think that's going to be, seen as a failure of the town. So I think we need to give the people the option. And if it's...
Does anybody, maybe I'm wrong, but I was under the impression that the stabilization money that stabilizing, not the stabilization account, but the stabilizing of the building, the money we spent to do that, to, fix the leaks and get the water out of the basement and so forth, that it was supposedly okay for 5 years or so. Am I incorrect on that, or?
I think that was based on what I recall, and also what was said at the meeting that we're talking about. the assumption was that was gonna carry the building for 5, or protect the building, keep it from going downhill further for 5 years approximately.
So
And
where are we on
but
that?
we're about 3 years into that, I think.
Oh, okay.
I think we're even further than that.
Are we
It was-
farther along?
I think it was
Okay,
like
yeah,
2015,
okay,
so.
Yeah, so they, I mean, what was said is that basically that's done, that, the benefit from that is just about done.
Yeah.
And we are at a point where, it's.
Put up
start to
or
do
shut up?
something- Yeah, start to do something more, or, where you've basically given up. So we need to look at it hard.
That ship has sailed.
Well, no, it did
what it was
its purpose.
intended
Yeah,
to do.
it did its
To some
purpose.
extent, I mean, it wasn't, it sounds like execution, maybe, in certain, being respectful of certain architectural forms, maybe execution wasn't as good as it could have been. There was some discussion of, paneling having been drilled through in order to put ties into hold things together as opposed to removing paneling, like beadboard paneling or whatever. I haven't been up to the second floor, so I don't know what the panel looks like, but apparently there was some, architectural type damage inflicted that could have been avoided. But other than that, yeah, the work was done and it's been,
It did its job,
yeah.
Okay.
but it's not the cure.
But you can't
It's a
count on
Band-Aid.
another 5 years.
We didn't, I don't know if that money has been turned back, but we didn't use all the money that was initially appropriated for that work. It came in out of the budget, if I'm correct.
Yeah,
That's correct.
And it
I
was
don't
stated
know
at
how
the
much is
meeting,
left.
it was stated at the meeting that money came back, that meeting. had
Yeah.
sunset back. There was some lamenting that, yeah, there was a sunset provision, so that money's got back.
believe-
General fund.
Is that before we started doing that stuff?
I'm not sure about that. Let's
Or-
find out.
And it was CPC money, wasn't it?
Yes.
I mean, I know they try to push things to conclusion and officially wrap things up, so,
So hold on, it's not like it goes back, it just never was taken out. But it's CPC,
yeah,
they present
Yep.
bills, it doesn't go like an appropriation.
that's right.
And then when it's not spent, it has to go back. It only, the appropriate up to an amount, and then that amount.
They can't spend anything.
Yeah, and then there's a point where the committee votes to close out the project. Once they do that, it's then, it doesn't become effective from a kind of audit standpoint till June 30th. But once they close it out and then June 30th comes and they've closed it out, it's gonna go from basically encumbered money into the balance, in this case of the historic reserve, the CPC historic reserve.
Did anyone have any ideas that no one's thought about in terms of usage?
Well, one thing, it's funny you frame it that way, because one of the things that I found most insightful in the meeting, and I've had the conversation previously as well, that there's a point of view that I think is very, very credible, that we don't want to be too focused on the end use, that there's inherent value in restoring the building so that it continues to exist as a building. If that happens, the actual end use of that building is likely to change over time. So there was the position voiced that we don't want to get too hung up on what's the use. Now, I think the voters are going to want to know before investing substantial money,
I can't
but-
see going to town meeting and say, we want, $750,000, we're gonna do a building. I don't know. That's gonna be a hard sell.
Yeah, there was some consensus at that meeting that there was a lack of meeting space. And, I can't tell you what the utilization is of all the meeting spaces in town, but there was a belief stated at that meeting that there was a lack of meeting spaces currently available. And this could be in addition to available meeting spaces. But Mike, I know you keep track of use of the annex. I don't know.
Yeah, we have a current, an overabundance of uses. The facilities are taxed. I mean,
So.
The annex gets used 400 times a year, different
I don't
things.
understand why we can't say we're gonna bring it back to its original muster, and then the town will use it if it sees fit.
That's kind of what I was, yeah, that's, I think that's a good,
Is it gonna be used by, you know, we can talk about 5 hours, the Girl Scouts, the Boy Scouts, or library needed, for their book sale. Yeah. Let's just fix it. And then we can deem what we're gonna use it for. It's pretty self-evident what it's gonna be. Is a room downstairs, 2 bathrooms, a little kitchen, bar, I don't know if you wanna keep the bar in it. And, upstairs.
Did you take that one?
So are you thinking about something like going to this particular town meeting in the fall and trying to get some money, maybe some CPA money or something like that, to do some type of engineering and cost analysis?
that's been my thinking, but I have asked Mike to consider whether that type of study could potentially be funded out of CPC administrative funds. I'm not sure if it could, but I'd like him to look at that, because if
I
it,
did look at that generally, and I'm leaning towards saying no.
okay, that, my thought was probably not, but I wanted to make sure, because, you know, I just feel like the next town meeting's 4.5 months, 5, you know, several months away. And so if we initiate a study coming out of late October, it's tight to get a proposal to the people next spring. And I just think time is not on our side, and I think anyone who's walked the building recently would agree with that.
So why don't you look at that again, Mike?
No, I mean, I don't think it's going to change that much, because the thing is that there are certain purposes for which you use, and the most comparable one would be that you can use it for appraisals. The difference is, however, you can use administrative funds for appraisals. Obviously, you can use it for administrative support and the like. But I think appraisals are a unique item, because you need an appraisal prior to being able to purchase open space. So that would be why it would fall as as an administrative cost, as opposed to a feasibility study, which I think in this particular case is something that should be voted upon, that the town votes for that, as opposed to, because you have to do the appraisal before you could even bring the proposal for the acquiring of the land, so that's why it's a little
I
different.
understand that, but you haven't done it.
So I mean, you look at the 44B. There's nothing in there to really explain what administrative costs can be. The literature on it basically limits it to basically what we would say administrative costs. The costs of whatever, running an office, running administrative help, and appraisals. Pretty much it.
So what do you need from us?
Nothing. Unless you want to, set some expectation. I mean, personally, I feel like,
Let's set some expectation that we get something in front of the voters on fall town meeting.
yep, that's,
And I think, I would think within a few weeks that we'll get some preliminary feedback from the group of people who were in that meeting and who are gonna be working on it. And, if they have some substantive feedback, then that gives us.
one question I have is just as to the role of the car post committee, because Thursday's meeting was not posted as a committee meeting. I think that is a question this board ought to look at in your reappointments, of just maybe taking a fresh look at the charge for that committee, and maybe update it based on your expectations of its work going forward.
We should do that on June 10th.
Good.
Okay.
And so,
You available June 10th?
Oh yeah.
I'll meet with them on June 10th. That's the day we got that thing down, whatever it is, right?
No, that's June 7th. The CSO thing?
Think about the Stonewall,
That's the June 7th,
which is Friday.
Friday, yep.
So this is
Monday.
Oh, yeah, that's a meeting.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they're stuck on, we started doing this thing, they're stuck on 5 years, because they think technology is changing so much. Generally, a 10-year contract.
That's what we have for Comcast.
Yeah, and they only want 5 years, so we didn't want that.
Yeah, we can, they made a couple of changes in there that, it wasn't just like reappointing the other one, and we had to kind of go through it and kind of got halfway through and then other things happened.
So, I guess you can put it on the agenda for, June 10th, Mike and I will meet, you guys want to meet June 10th, right?
That week, we have 2 tentative dates pinned down for that week that we're holding for the Verizon. We've got 2 dates that Mike and I and they are holding, so that I can send them to you. But I had, remember I'd asked you for dates, and you said it was a little far out. So what we did is, we just picked down two alternatives, so whichever date works for you is what we'll go with. Okay.
And you know the, out the 13th and 14th.
That wasn't one of the dates, I think.
Okay, I didn't think so, but.
Yeah, okay. So in that case, I would think we'd not put that on the board agenda until the 24th. Is
What
that,
would we be trying to do, are we unhappy with what's going on now?
There's nothing you can do with that.
No, the only thing we really,
Take it or leave it?
Yeah, but we were trying to, the whole new, we were supposed to do, from 10 to 5, and they weren't holding on that, because they didn't wanna commit to the level of service they were providing and the kind of service they were providing, because they thought the industry was changing so fast. Who knows what's going to happen, and they didn't, in 8 years, not everything was so antiquated that they're doing now, they didn't want to have to, in a contract, say, they still have to continue. Right. Okay. Because the industry's moving so fast. It might be all wireless, like that, who knows?
So they were still agreeing to, or I think there was a discussion here, that they were still wanting to offer mobile access. What does PEG stand for?
Public education.
government?
So is that the, wasn't there a Supreme Court decision that removed the necessity for local cable providers? It's great if they are, but I thought for some reason there had been a Supreme Court decision.
There was.
Like in the last year.
Like in the last month or so.
Okay, maybe it was even more recent than I thought.
Well, that took place for all the
Right.
access, all these.
Right, exactly, so that's why I just thought it was interesting that it was mentioned there.
There was something though that,
We won't bring it up then.
no, they know about it.
Yeah, well, there's no sense in trying to think you're hiding something, obviously, I know more about it.
One issue I can tell you that's been an issue in other cable renewal contracts I've been part of up in Maine is the practice of taking that kind of prime spot of being in this low digits for the local channel and putting it into like the 700s or some. It's called channel slamming. It's a term. If you Google it, it's actually become. So that's the kind of thing that in negotiating we would want to.
You're 42 and 9.
So we want to keep those channels, and we'd want to contractually.
So I did
Okay.
encounter somebody recently who told me that they had Verizon and that they could no longer get the local programming channel. So,
Something happened on the Verizon then, we didn't know it.
Yeah.
So somebody like called in and said, you're not on.
yeah.
We had a tape, but we weren't on live.
So
So-
now it could be available.
Oh, it's on TV right now.
Okay. Yeah, this was about a month and a half.
Yeah, something happened with remember when Adam was here?
Yep.
Verizon,
Yep.
that's all fixed, so. Well,
Question, authorization to,
how much fun is this going to be? You don't want me to have that much fun.
It's not going to be that much fun.
More excited place than Nick Adams.
I'm trying to move it around the state. Probably.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Throw some bones to the western part of the state. They probably don't, talking about western part of the state, they don't even probably have, cable. No, it's the high-speed internet.
Right.
Because, well, Adams is this college area, but out there, that's one of the biggest things where they say they want to try to develop companies out there.
That's
Won't
true,
go because
yeah.
they don't have high-speed internet. Okay, make a motion to approve.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
You're staying at like, hopefully you're staying in the dorm rooms at the college?
It's, I think it's a Holiday Inn that's part of Mass Mocha. So that'll be the one nice part is Mass Mocha's kind of nice. Yeah. Yeah.
Follow up, assignments, let's see.
You think do you think that the veterans, the committee there is going to meet before our next meeting? That you can get the word to them that our expectations is, or do we not even want to say anything?
You mean on the car post?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can, I talk to Bob pretty regularly about it. And
Want to wait for our new charge? If you-
what I'll do,
Suggestions about-
yeah, I'll send out a copy of the current charge and say this is gonna be, updated, reviewed for update on June 10th and invite their input on suggestions they may have. I know, Marlene Switzer's a member of the committee. She's very, very focused on the building.
Yeah, send it to us, too.
Yeah, yep.
Anything else that, I'm just trying to see.
So we'll put out a broad call for interest in committee appointments.
Yeah, that would probably be the biggest thing.
Yeah.
Chief Durand will follow up with the residents on Chase Street. We'll update the bridge webpage. We'll look into the insurance on the ACO vehicle. Obviously, parking is it's a major focus for the July 13th event.
Any way that riding and driving club can bring people up on horses?
We're looking at that. So, but other than that, I would say the handout from the last meeting that talked about kind of near term and anything that was in there for kind of vital near term, you can assume I'm working on pretty much all the time. So just for example, the switch out of the accounting software and implementing a new chart of accounts is well, Lori's been doing most of the work. Unfortunately, with the parade, that's just gobbled up a bunch of my time. But she and I are meeting tomorrow. We have a draft chart of accounts. We met with a vendor about a month ago, did a training. It was just she and I and Annie. So Lori and I are meeting tomorrow to tighten up the draft. Then we want to send that around to departments, get their input, and probably have a department head meeting in the next 2 weeks just to make everyone aware of the transition and the new account numbering that we'll be assigning to different departmental budgets. So there's a, I think it's going along, but there's a lot of work ahead of us. There's a lot of detail work in that. So I can send you the draft if you want. It's a pretty, yeah.
You kind of want to be top down. You don't want.
You
don't want to say, well, I want to have this account and this account like I used to.
Yeah, it's.
Because then
we're not.
Everything off.
Yeah, no. We're Lori and I are adamant. We're having a uniform.
Okay.
So within the department, for instance, the suffix to the numbering system is going to be uniform across the organization. Okay. So I don't know what the numbers will be, but it'll be like 015 is training, whether it's 015 in police or building or and like communications and postage. Yeah, no, we're that.
People doing customization.
No, because that's the key to having the new chart of accounts to allow us to standardize how things are accounted. But there is going to be a learning curve in terms of the staff who do the coding, and also where we have all the committees, commissions, and boards doing their own approval of invoice. So that's I wish we could, I wish we had more time to do this, and we could have we could roll it out over a longer period, but we don't, and do the best we can. But it's you know the situation, so.
So, I would say at the next meeting, go over your vital, your.
Sure, that sounds good. Yeah, I think that would be good. A lot of that's in there for kind of current vital is stuff that's already in motion that has to happen. In some cases, for example, we've got paperwork due to the state by June 30th to complete the reimbursement for the bicentennial. There's 12,500. So there's things like that have to happen between now and June 30th. But I think for anything from July 1st forward, I think that would be very productive to start that discussion of the board's priorities for next year.
And obviously we're gonna do, so in terms of appointments, we're gonna know where we stand with all the empty slots versus, the places where we have too many candidates for the same slot. So are we gonna, I think we should nail it down, we're gonna do some appointments next time, right? Right. Okay. And I would say, let's do as many as we can.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So, can I ask, well, going back to equipment, when you, conservation has 5 on it now, correct?
I believe so, yes.
Now, when I was reading that thing earlier, talking about it said we could have up to 7, is that true?
It said that, yeah.
I believe so.
We could add more members if we wanted. You don't have to have just 5. We agree that was great.
I don't. 3 to 7? Yeah.
Let's say 7, I remember reading that, yeah. I don't know about the law. Was it 3?
I have to look at it again. I haven't looked at the numbers.
Commission shall consist of not less than 3, no more than 7 members.
And we have 5.
Okay. Make a motion to adjourn into executive session? All in favor? Aye.
Roll call vote.
Aye. Aye. Kemper, aye.
Archibald, aye.
Great. Thank you.